So, I've seen a lot of channels on YouTube that review questions and answers from Reddit, but I decided to see Quora, and it doesn't have the same vibe as Reddit. I'm not going to compare the two, but Quora is also a really interesting questions and answers site. People share a lot of interesting advice, stories, just general anecdotes that you can learn a lot from. So I'm going to dive into it, and maybe you might enjoy Quora after this. There's one forum that I saw, and it's called "What is the one picture that describes the lowest point in your life?" And it really caught my attention, um, because it's you look at a picture and you don't expect it to have as much story as it does. The girl that has her back towards the camera in this picture is me. That was my brother signing my father to be quiet as he took the picture. This was one of our first dinners since my mother's death. One of our first dinners without her presence. My mother died from a particularly rare cancer, paraganglioma, earlier that year when I was merely 10 years old. I received the news rather inconveniently. I had visited my mother at the hospital the night before, and I went home with my brother and grandma. I slept in my mother's bedroom since my father was staying with her at the hospital. I couldn't really sleep that night, as I felt like something was wrong, though I dozed off eventually, but would soon be awoken. At 3 a.m., the door to my parents' bedroom, where I was staying, slowly opened, with small whispers emerging. It was my aunt and her son, pattering softly into the room with tear-streaked faces. My aunt gently approached me, that was slowly waking up, and she told me, with a consoling tone, that my mother had passed away. This picture was in June, during our first Ramadan without my mother. We were breaking our fasts, and the air was still heavy with gloom, even though it had been months since my mother's passing. Countless somber, depressing dinners were spent with my brother and my father, mourning deeply even months after. This was a small note that I wrote my mother the last night I saw her, the last night before I was informed of her passing. When I gave her that note, her wan face melted into a gentle, weak smile as she kissed my forehead gently. I would have savored the moment more that time if I knew that would have been the last time she'll ever kiss my forehead. That night, my mother's condition was particularly critical and unstable, and I was whisked away out of the room every time the doctors and nurses barged in with hushed whispers. She had battled cancer for nearly a decade. I believe she had fallen ill a couple of months or a year or two after my birth. I couldn't put myself in her shoes, unable to imagine all the litany of afflictions she went through. I was in 5th grade elementary at the time. Now I'm 14, turning 15 in September, and just starting high school, and happy as ever with my family. I've always missed her, but was always comforted by the thought, knowing that my mother is freed from all her previous pains and suffering. And I hope she is happy now too. Oh, that's really sad. So here we see a man that's quite overweight. So I think we can assume what the story is going to be about, but let's get ahead and read it anyways. I was close to death. After a time of eating disorder, I ballooned up to 36 stone at my peak, 228 kg, 512 pounds, 1/4 of a US metric ton. I've written about this before, but for those who do not know, my poor wife had endured a nightmarish journey. She watched me gradually get more and more poorly. She had to watch the countless times I suffered heart issues and I had to be taken to hospital in ambulances. She was my true angel. She never gave up on me. I'm a very, very lucky man to have found her. Most women would have dumped me, certainly not serviced me in every way imaginable. In the end, I was faced with a big decision. The doctors explained I could have surgery, but also told me I could easily die in theatre. There was a 25% chance. When I considered my wife's position, I came to realize that she deserved to be free of my burden one way or another. So I decided to do it. I figured that if I go through it, she would get her husband back. If I expired, then at least she could now find new happiness, free of the flesh mountain I had become. I knew she would be upset, but time would have healed her. I took the best attitude I possibly could into the operating room. After signing endless forms, giving the hospital full legal exemption for anything that could go wrong, I was signing Monty Python's "Always Look on the Bright Side of Death" as I was wheeled in. My wife filmed this. After 4 hours of difficult surgery, I emerged alive, still singing as I came round. The surgeon was a true star. I had to learn to eat again. The party was over. I had got a gastric sleeve created instead of a stomach and had to start taking milk for the first 2 weeks. It was like being a baby again. I had to start from scratch. Then it was Complan played havoc with my rear end. Then it was liquidized food. And finally, 2 months later, a small amount of solids. The weight fell off me over the course of the next year. Life got a lot better. My angel got her husband back. I live to tell the tale because the story goes on. My eating still remains a challenge because the gastric sleeve will stretch over time. For now, I'm a slender 20-stone hunk of a man. Okay, that's interesting. Wow. I wonder how he feels looking back at that photo. And wonders what would happen if he didn't decide to do the surgery. So, yeah, and I guess those photos also remind you not only of yourself, but also the people surrounding you in that moment, who was supportive and who was not. So, yeah.